Hello, dear ones. You are watching the Berean Girl channel. Welcome and thank you for joining me, Heather Zubiotti, on my mission to see if what they say is so. We're continuing on in my testimony. This is part 7. This is where I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty here of when the Lord was dealing with my mother and consequently me also. Here we go. This is plague number 1, heart trouble. Again, I'm reading an article I wrote, so to keep me on task. Love these scripts. All right. Plague number 1, heart trouble. My mom was hardly ever sick my whole life. She was the picture of health as far as I was concerned, but after her second marriage dissolved into divorce because the man she eventually did marry committed adultery on her. And she started to exhibit some alarming symptoms. It was a morning she had jury duty, so she was leaving my house. Of course, she was annoyed. I mean, most people don't like jury duty. So, but she seemed fine. She was physically all right. And later that morning, I got a phone call from a deputy at the courthouse telling me my mom had passed out. Now, she had said that it was kind of warm in the room, not to alarm me, but, as per protocol, they had to call an ambulance and take her to the hospital. So they told me what hospital to go to. It was a little tiny hospital in our area. So I got there and she was glad to see me. And she said it looked like she wasn't going to be going home anytime soon because they kept adding medical equipment to her. Finally, someone told us that her heart was not working right. Her heart rate was just zooming out of control. It was very erratic. I wish of course, they didn't really know a whole lot. They're doing tests. But it would sure have been nice to have somebody, I don't know, those doctor shows on TV, like Dr. Brackett and Dr. Early, tell you what the heck is going on. But no explanations were given as to why this was happening. Was she dehydrated? Was she, nothing. So more tests had to be done. She was staying in the hospital. So the next day, after a nearly sleepless night spent rebuking and binding, naming and claiming, also known as heavy spiritual warfare, I raced to the hospital. With Bible in hand, I entered her room only to find her bed empty. What would that do to you? Well, I think my heart stopped. I inquired at the desk and I was told that she was in ICU. What? I was so upset that nobody had called me and they claimed they had called me. Well, somebody got a phone call. It wasn't me. So my own heart began to race and pound erratically. Was I having a heart attack? So I found her. There she was in ICU, all hooked up to a heart monitor. And that thing told me that her heart was indeed way out of control. I mean, that thing was just revving. It was pretty scary. She said that during the night, her heart rate had went sky high, which sent the medical staff into high gear, and they placed her in ICU. She was on some medications to get that heart rate down and under control. After days and days of reading the word to her and making positive confessions, we were told matter-of-factly that she needed a heart transplant. Again, what? A heart transplant? No. This is when a second opinion is absolutely vital and required. I mean, second opinions are there for a reason. Why was this name it and claim it stuff not working, apparently? That is what a sane person would ask. But we minions, are taught to have faith like Abraham. And we are taught to not question the Word of Faith teachings either. But if anyone did dare to question them, then they would be ridiculed and even threatened with, "Touch not my anointed." Or they would say something like, "Other people who spoke against us got cancer and died." That is a threat. By this time, my mom was spitting bullets, which of course wasn't good for her heart rate. It takes a lot to get my mom's dander up, and she had had enough of their care, or rather lack of it, and so had I. I don't know anybody who likes being in a hospital. We wanted to get out of there quickly, but because we just knew that the diagnosis of her needing a heart transplant was ridiculous. No explanation was given as to the reason for her heart acting that way after years of perfect health. So when we finally did get her out of there, and we got her to a specialist for that second opinion, the heart transplant was out, of course. But he did at least have an explanation of what was going on. She needed an angioplasty. Well, that is way better than a heart transplant, and it does explain why her heart wasn't acting right. One of her arteries was apparently kind of clogged. So they have a solution for that, and one that's fairly routine. This doctor he's done so many of them, he could probably do it in his sleep. But even so, my mom wouldn't let a practicing doctor, implying that he doesn't know what he's doing, touch her heart with a 10-foot pole, and refused the routine procedure. Why? Because that is what the Word of Faith cult teaches you. Sure, go to the hospital. That's what they say. Have a couple of tests and a few procedures done. But remember, all doctors are buffoons. They are practicing, and they are completely incapable of healing anyone. By the way, most doctors know that they can't heal anyone. I mean, surgery does aid in healing, that they will fix what's broken, but the body itself does the healing. They know that. They know their knowledge is limited, and they can only diagnose and apply what they have learned works in order to aid the body in its own effort to restore health. But what the prosperity bunch so conveniently forget to say is that in every profession, including theirs, there are buffoons and adepts, or those who know what they're doing. They also forget to mention that had they not taken the medical advice of their clueless doctor, and had they not accepted the procedures that they recommended, then they wouldn't be here today, all positive confession aside. They want you, dear one, not them, to be healed on faith alone. Now, they will deny this, but according to them, their hospital stays are brief and almost non-existent. The reality is that not many Word of Faith minions even know that Kenneth Dad Hagin really died in the hospital of cardiac crisis, and not at home like the Prosperity Bunch claim he did. Yeah, they are lying through their pearly white fangs. Dad Hagin arrogantly once said that if he had had a headache, or if he physically felt bad, he would never tell you. Why? Because that is a negative confession. So, if that was indeed true, that if he ever told you that he felt bad, that's a negative confession, then why would he be forthcoming with any information regarding several hospitalizations for heart failure that he had. He had, in fact, 4 major heart failures in 1939, 1942, 1949, and 1973, where he spent time in the hospital under a doctor's care. Many will deny this, of course, and claim that it was all his positive confessions that caused Jesus to heal him. Was it? I don't think so. If that were true, why was he often plagued with heart failure if Jesus healed him? Did he confess this into his life? No one seems to ask those kinds of probing questions. Now, these wolves don't outright instruct you to stop taking your medications, nor do they tell you to stop going to the doctor, because then they could be sued. And then that would mean they'd have to part with all that beautiful mammon they stole from the sheep, the poor sheep, I'd like to add. But that is exactly what is heavily implied and even enforced by them and other heartless word of faith minions. In this manner, this is how it goes. If you fully submit to medical treatment, then they say your faith is small, it's weak, and you are therefore a subpar Christian. Can I get an amen from the outcasts? You know, with all the claims from non-Christians that there are contradictions in the Bible, it amazes me how so-called Christians, prosperity preachers to be more specific, provide more than enough biblical contradictions in their own teachings. Yet, most Christians are oblivious to them. One claim being that Jesus was not victorious on the cross, which is, according to them, a symbol of failure. Excuse me? Yet, without blinking an eye, in the same breath, they claim, because of Jesus' stripes, you are healed. Do you see what I mean? That is a direct contradiction. How can the cross of Christ be a symbol of failure on one hand, while at the same time be the means of defeat for sickness and sin on the other? Isn't the defeat of sickness a success? I've heard and read this teaching many times. I've heard it from their own mouths. And this is not a case of irony, paradox, or satire. No, they truly believe and teach that God is a failure. Also, if Kenneth Hagin was indeed personally anointed by Jesus himself to be a faith healer, then why did his sister die of cancer? These are things that should make people say, No, I don't say that mockingly, mostly. I say that simply because they're facts. And logical reason demands that these questions should be asked and answered. In my own life, since I wanted my mom to be healed by Jesus, I concluded she was right when she claimed that Jesus had healed her. What was her proof? Her proof was that every time she went to the pharmacy to fill her prescription of Coumadin, they botched it. Or they didn't have it in stock. Can you imagine not having a major pharmaceutical in stock? Okay. For that very reason, that's why she concluded Jesus didn't want her to take that stuff anymore. Okay. This is a classic case of where correlation isn't causation. Even so, I would have been more comfortable to have had medical confirmation that she didn't need this medication anymore. Even the giants of the word of faith give you that much. They claim that's okay. For a long time, I watched her like a hawk, but then she moved out of my home and far away from me, about 45 minutes away, moved to my sister's home. Of course, I was a little hurt, but and Lori would not have fussed over her the way I did. So at any rate, my mom never got the procedure done, and to my knowledge, she didn't have another episode. So through this trial, I actually finally started to search God for answers because things did not seem right. But when she seemingly got better, I pulled back because the immediate threat subsided. But that was only a hint of what was to come. The total devastation of the perfect storm was on the horizon, just out of view. I'm going to go ahead and continue with plague number 2. The C word. The C word. There are few things more devastating than hearing that you or a loved one has cancer. There, I said it. I said the C word. And this frightening reality would soon hit home. At this point, I would also like to point out that even after decades of the Word of Faith Bunch's teachings, that even many of them have succumbed to and have continued to exhibit a host of cancers and other ailments such as heart failure, and yes, they even die from them. Shouldn't there logically be a complete absence of these types of illnesses if their teachings are true? I mean, let's just think about this for a minute, shall we? I have some questions. Why do these things even come upon them in the first place if they don't confess them? That's one of their teachings. Why doesn't Satan flee and the sickness vanish after they stand in faith with all their rebuking and binding, naming and claiming? That's their way of resisting him. Would the sick person have fully recovered on faith alone, as opposed to using medical intervention? These are logical and reasonable questions that must be answered, not waved off or rebuked. God himself welcomes honest questions from his searching and lost souls that are longing for honest answers, his little lost sheep. He never turns them away or ridicules them. He might test their faith a little, like he did with the woman, the Syrophoenician woman. She wasn't a Jew. So he tested her faith, and she stood the test. Boy, did she. Jesus was so proud. But the word of faith people, they ridicule you. A couple of years after her heart scare, my mom started to exhibit a lack of mobility in her left arm. She wasn't able to move it very well, and it progressed to her left leg. Now that was alarming because, of course, it's on her left side, the same side as her heart. Again, I don't know a whole lot about medical issues, but she didn't seem to have a stroke. Again, that would have limited her mobility. So that was very troubling. She claimed she had injured herself at work, but she, of course, refused to go see a doctor. Typical word of faith indoctrination at work. Here we go again. Finally, she relented to see a Christian chiropractor. Chiropractic means, or roughly means, done by hand, or practical hand in Latin. The idea behind the practice is that when the bones are in alignment, then your body is functioning properly. There's no kinks in the line, if you will. I mean, it kind of makes sense, because if you ever had a pinched nerve, it is extremely painful and debilitating, but once it's unkinked, unpinched, then all is well. And our posture, if you've noticed, if you have what my son's middle school music teacher calls poopy posture, just your posture alone, if you just sit up straight, it just makes such a world of difference. So, but these days, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. Well, it just goes to show you that it all depends on the doctor you have and upon their knowledge and skill, like anything. So anyway, she went to go see this chiropractor, and then he called me into his office with a very grave look on his face. That was alarming. But there was my mom, sitting in a chair looking at the floor. She was looking down at the floor, and she seemed kind of nervous. So I fixed my gaze back onto the good doctor's solemn face, and I braced myself for the obviously bad news that was to come. But I was in no way prepared for what he was about to say. He said, "Your mom has a large mass on her left breast. She needs medical attention immediately." What? Again, this just hit me out of the clear blue sky. It was like somebody slapped me in the face. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach, but I was calm, strangely and eerily calm. Then he said that she needed, of course, medical attention, not to wait. He was sternly adamant in manner and tone, so I knew it was very serious. I mean, of course, it's serious. I collected my mom, thanked him for his time and his wonderful prayer. We walked slowly back to my car because, of course, she had a hard time walking. And I was just in a daze. Yet I had no questions like, "How long have you had this lump?" Or, "What in the HE double toothpick is wrong with you?" Or, "Why didn't you say something when you first noticed this?" No, I just said, "Wow, I can't believe how calm I am." And my mom tearfully agreed. She agreed with me in relief. You know, dear one, as a veteran of many medical tragedies and crises, one would think that by now I would be naturally less prone to freaking out. Even so, I was more amazed by my state of calm than I was eager to find out any information from my mom, because you see, that would entail negative confession, which must be avoided at all costs. So I called the leader of our Bible study and I told her what little I knew and that we would be there that night as usual. Our Bible studies were every Monday night. I had no idea what was in store for us. My mind was swirling. I mean, it's one of those where everything's in slow motion. It's so weird. But I had one seeming lifeline, our Bible study group, once affectionately known to me as the Peeps, because they believed as we did, and they understood what needed to be done, which was, of course, positive confession and radical faith. There's a lot to be said for support when you're going through a hard time. Really, that is what family and close friends are for, moral and physical support. Even if it is somewhat dysfunctional, it is still a blessing regardless. After all this, well, when we had gone to the Bible study, of course, there were words from the Lord that she would be healed. And, of course, we ate them up because that's what we wanted to hear. So after all that, our family went on our scheduled vacation. At that time, when the children were smaller, we'd make a commitment to go see Robert's dad and Robert's stepmom, Beth, and I needed that vacation. I needed to get away for a little while. I needed a pleasant distraction. Even so, I was waiting for the news from my sister regarding our mom's health status, and after she had scheduled, of course, an examination to find out what we could do. We had a nice family visit, and on the way home, that's when I received that tearful call from my sister Lori. When Lori cries, it's really bad. She's much stronger than me emotionally, but that doesn't mean she's heartless. So I braced myself for the news. Literally, I think I was white knuckling the seat I was sitting in. She said, "The cancer has moved to her brain. That is why she can't move her left side." She was sobbing. I closed my eyes, fighting the tears, and thought, oh my God. Those familiar knives of fear, terror, and dread stabbed my soul. I told her I understood and that we would be home soon. She said brain surgery was scheduled and we would go from there. I did the only thing I could think of doing, and that was call the leader of the peeps. In restrained, tearful agony, I told her only so much. Ken, you don't want any no negative confessions. And I did not even dare to say the C word. I could go on and tell you absolutely every agonizing detail of this. I think it was about 2 years after the fact, but I won't. The point is that even at that physically difficult and emotionally trying time, both my mom and I were not yet ready to face the truth. We were living a lie. We were basking in that false light that hid great darkness. A false light that Jesus talked about in Matthew 6:23, which is actually paired with, he's talking about if your eye is bad, meaning greedy, or if your eye is good, if you're generous. I mean, word of faith people are greedy. Their eye is bad. I don't care what they say. I don't care what their intentions are. The facts remain. They are lost in great darkness. And so that's where we were. Very spiritually lost. I'm going to leave it here. We'll continue on in the next video, which will be entitled Fighting the Good Fight. And there is such a thing. There is such a thing as real, genuine faith and fighting that good fight. So I hope you stay tuned. I hope you continue on in my journey here, my testimony. And I'll talk to you later. I love you. Bye-bye now.